Good evening, everyone, or afternoon, or whatever the heck you want to call it. Well, a certain point of the day, it just really doesn't matter anymore. But what does matter is education. And I know there's a lot of people that have probably covered the U.S. Constitution. I have a friend of mine, her kid is not doing so good in school, so I'm tutoring him. And because of this, I've been drawing up these notes, and I decided, well, what the hey, I'll just share what I know with all of you. When it comes to the U.S. Constitution, it is divided up in a series of articles, and the very first one talks about the legislative branch of the United States government and its responsibilities, its duties, so on and so forth. Now, I'm not going to go truly in depth with all this. I'll just give you what I can, and then you just have to take it from here. But in Article 1 of the United States Constitution, which is a piece of paper that I think people should become very familiar with, and when you don't, you really don't know what your rights really are. And that could be a problematic thing. Anyway, in Article 1, it says that the people that make the laws are your people in the House of Representatives and the people in the Senate. Now, keep in mind that the Senate was formed here in the United States under the pattern that was established back in Rome, Italy, back in the Roman days. Actually, Senate comes from senatus. So if you want to talk about the Roman senatus, then you would have a pretty good idea how our Senate was actually formed. Okay, so it is your House of Representatives and it is your senators that make your law. Now, how do the House of Representatives get elected? Well, first of all, anybody that serves in the House of Representatives must be at least 25 years old. If you're just not 25 years old, let me tell you something, you are not going to get into the United States House of Representatives. You might get into your respective states' House of Representatives, but you're not going to get into the federal House of Representatives. It's just not going to work that way. You must be a citizen of the United States for at least 7 years before you go to the United States House of Representatives. If you haven't been a citizen of this United States for 7 years, you're not going to the U.S. House of Representatives. It's that simple. And you must live in the state in which you are elected. In other words, if you want to run for a House of Representatives seat in Kentucky, you can't live in Indiana. It doesn't work that way. You could run for Indiana, but you could not run for Kentucky. You have to live in Kentucky if you're going to be a representative for Kentucky. It's that simple. All right? Now, people in the House of Representatives are given 2-year terms. That's kind of interesting. I thought originally it was 4, but apparently it's only 2. So you really have to accomplish a lot in 2 years, or you have to go through the election again. Now, in the early 20th century, there was a little law that was passed that said that there are now 435 people that can be in the House of Representatives. No more, no less. Now, before that time, it was a little different, but in the House of Representatives now, there are to be 435 members according to the law that was passed in the early 20th century. Okay, this is back in I believe it was 1911 or 1913, somewhere along the line. In that period of time, there was a law passed that said you have 435 people in the House of Representatives at all times. Okay. Now, the House chooses its own speaker. And the House of Representatives has the power to impeach a president. Now, the House of Representatives has the power to bring charges against the President of the United States and say, okay, you have to face a trial. Now, they don't actually do the trial, but they can bring the charges to the President. Okay. Now, this directly contrasts with your senators. Each state that is in our union is appointed 2 senators. Well, I wouldn't say appointed, okay? You have the ability to have 2 senators elected for each and every one of your states. We have 50 states, and 50 times 2 is 100. Now, a senator runs a 6-year term, and what they do is they split these senators into 3 different groups. And so every 2 years, a group of senators is elected. Another 2 years later, another group of senators are elected. And another 2 years later, another group of senators are elected. And so that keeps the Senate fresh. Okay. Now, how do you become a senator of the United States? Well, you have to first be 30 years old. Sorry, if you're not 30 years old, you're not getting in there. Might make it to a state senate seat, but you're not making it to the United States Senate unless you're 30 years old. Number 2, you have to be a citizen of the United States for 9 years. Okay, if you're not a citizen of the United States for 9 years, you're not getting in the U.S. Senate. It's that simple. Number 3, you have to be a resident of the state you're trying to run for. Now, this goes back to what I was telling you previously. If you wanted to be a senator in the state of Texas, you can't live in Louisiana. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. You have to live in Texas if you're going to be a senator from Texas. Okay? And when you get elected to be senator, you are there for 6 years, and then your other senator, because every state has 2 of them. Okay, so one senator gets elected 1 year, and then on a different year, the other senator gets elected. So 1/3 of the Senate is elected 1 year. 2 years later, another third of the Senate is elected. Another 2 years later, another third of the Senate is elected, and it keeps the Senate seats fresh. Okay? Now, if the House of Representatives can bring charges against the president, who then does the trial? Well, that would be your Senate. Your Senate does the trial. And whoever the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is at the time, he's the one that presides over the Senate. Now, in order to get a president impeached, literally removed from office, okay, the Senate has to have a 2/3 vote. In other words, 2/3 of the senators have to agree that this joker president is not doing his job right, and if that's true, then he gets voted out of office. Thing is, that's where they have to stop. Then, if the president has really committed a bad act, then he has to face a separate trial in a separate court to face other penalties. Okay? So the only thing he faces when he faces the Senate is the possibility of him being removed from the President of the United States. Nothing else. So that's kind of a brief rundown of the United States Constitution, at least Article 1. And I will tell you more in a future video, so stay tuned.